The True Dracos from Maximum Crisis have proven to be extremely popular, so much so that they're even the game mat that the top cut finishers at this year's World Championship qualifiers will receive. However, the other thing we've received is a lot of questions on them, as they are a little bit different than many monsters you would have dealt with in the past. So the True Dracos are mainly a tribute summon-based theme, but one of the main mechanics of them is that you don't always have to tribute monsters for them. In fact, you can contribute continuous spell or trap cards to summon the main True Draco monsters. So we've received a bunch of questions on these, and I have compiled all the most frequent ones. I got 2 pages of them. You can see they're very popular. So I figured I would just go ahead and answer these so that we're all on the same page. So the first one pertains to the 3 smaller True Draco monsters, Ignis Heat, Majesty Maiden, and Dynamite Knight. And the question is, what kind of effects are the search effects of these cards? So each of these, when your opponent activates something, anything, you can search your deck for another card that is specified by the card in question. So Majesty Maiden gets monsters, Ignis Heat gets spells, and Dynamite Knight gets traps. And for the spells and traps, you can either add them to your hand or activate them straight to the field. So question 1 is, what kind of effect is that? That effect is a quick effect, and you can tell because in the text down here you see once per turn during either player's turn. That during either player's turn is the clue in the card text that you're dealing with a quick effect. Incidentally, that means that if you have multiple monsters out and your opponent activates a card, you can only chain one of them to it. You can't just use all 3 right away, because it's a quick effect that needs to be chained directly to the card in question. This is a lot like the Paleozoics, for example, or the Psyframe lore, or Psyframe Gamma. Additionally, because this is a quick effect, but it doesn't negate the activation of anything, and it doesn't do any of the other things that are listed as being allowed, you can't use that effect in the damage step. So one way that you can get past these cards is attack them with something only slightly smaller, and then use an attack pump during the damage step. That way, they don't get any cards, and you take out their monster. So our next question is, can you tribute Facedown continuous spell or trap cards to summon these? I figure a lot of people are thinking, well, if it's face down, you don't know that it's a continuous spell or trap, so you shouldn't be able to tribute it. However, the rules for tributing monsters essentially also apply to tributing continuous spells and traps. And that means that you can also tribute face down continuous spell and trap cards. Because remember, when you're dealing with tributing monsters, monster doesn't have to be face up. If you have a face down winged beast, for example, you can tribute it for Icarus attack, even though you can't see that it's a winged beast and you wouldn't know. That's just the way the rules of tributing work, and they also apply to these cards. So continuous spell and trap cards, if they're face down, you can still tribute them. Now this next one deals specifically with these 2 cards, Ignis Heat and Dynamite Knight. They have an ability that lets you activate cards straight from your deck, which is kind of a strange thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because normally you can't activate anything while a chain is resolving. They don't quite work like normal activations. So for example, if you activate a spell card with Ignis Heat, it won't give you spell counters for anything. But the question is, can you chain anything to that activation? And the answer is no. And that is because it's happening during the resolution of a chain. There's actually just no way that you're even allowed to activate cards or effects when one of these guys is activating a True King or True Draco continuous card from the deck. You're in the middle of a resolving chain, and let's say that it worked like Formula Synchron, which it doesn't. But let's say that it did, and it was after this card effect resolves, activate a whatever from your deck. You still couldn't do it because you're in the middle of a resolving chain, and these will always be chain link 2 or higher because they're quick effects that have to chain to something else. So that's about it for them. Our next couple of questions, actually just one main one, here on Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King. You're probably going to see a lot of this guy. He's going to be a big part of the competitive landscape this summer. So the way Masterpiece works is he gets immunity to effects of cards with the same type as the cards that you tribute for him. But the key part of his text is that he's unaffected by the effects of cards with the same card type as the original type of the cards tributed for its tribute summon. So if you have, for example, a Crystal Beast, which has turned into a continuous spell card, and you tribute it for Masterpiece, Masterpiece becomes immune to monster effects, because the original card type of it is monster. Which leads to our question, is what happens if I tribute a Pendulum monster for Masterpiece? So there's two important things here. One is that a card that is in your Pendulum zone is not a continuous spell. It's a spell card, but it is a Pendulum monster card in your Pendulum zone that is a spell card. It is not a continuous spell. So you can't tribute that for Masterpiece at all. But let's say you just have a Pendulum monster on the field, and you tribute it for Masterpiece. Well, Masterpiece is immune to monster effects. Just because you could play a Pendulum monster card as a spell card doesn't mean that its original card type is spell. It's a monster. So you'll only ever get immunity to monster effects out of it that way. Moving on, we had a couple questions on the True Draco spell cards. First off, True Draco Heritage. This card says, during your main phase, you can draw cards equal to the number of True Draco and True King card types, monster, spell, or trap, that are sent from the field to the graveyard this turn. And the question is, does this count cards that were sent to my opponent's graveyard? So say my opponent has True King Revival, and he uses it to special summon a True Draco monster, and then tributes both of them for Masterpiece. Well, in that case, two cards have been sent, two different card types, monster and trap, have been sent to my opponent's graveyard. I want to play True Draco Heritage and just draw two cards. Can I do it? Yes. Yes, I can. Doesn't say sent from the field to your graveyard, just sent from the field to the graveyard. So that means either players. That means that in a mirror match, you have to be really careful about when you do your tribute summons, because you might be handing your opponent a pile of free cards that they wouldn't have otherwise. Also have a question that's come up quite a bit on Disciples of the True Draco Phoenix. And the question is, when do I use the first effect of Disciples? So the first effect is the one that lets you target 3 True Draco and or True King cards in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 1 card. That is a card effect that you can use once per turn during your main phase. It's essentially like an ignition effect. It's basically exactly the same as the first effect of True Draco Heritage. It's just that True Draco Heritage doesn't have a cost, it doesn't do anything at activation, so it needs during your main phase, whereas this will just start with the thing you do at activation. Now, the last guy isn't a True Draco, he's a True King, but we got a couple questions on him as well, and that's the True King of all Calamities. This has been a very popular monster, not just in True King decks. It's been a big part of dinosaur decks as well that are making use of True King Lithosagem. Normally you'll summon it with True King and, say, Trishula for a nasty 1-2 punch. But questions we've got on this, the first one is on its first effect. Does it change the attributes of monsters that are summoned after it resolves? So this effect says, during the player's turn, you can detach 1 Exceed material from this card and declare an attribute. This turn, all face-up monsters on the field become that attribute. Also, monsters in your opponent's possession of that attribute can activate their effects or attack, etc., etc. That effect lasts this turn, not when it resolves, not everything that was there when it resolves, just this turn. And as a result, new monsters that are summoned after it resolves will also become the declared attribute. True King of all Calamities is really, really good. And the last one is about the other effect, the one that lets you destroy your opponent's monsters that you would choose with a True King if you do not use the first effect. So can you still destroy your opponent's monsters for a True King effect if you did not first activate True King of all Calamities effect to change attributes? And the answer is you can, as long as they are already appropriate monsters for that effect. You only need 1 monster of a matching attribute, so even if you don't change anything, say because he's out of materials, you could still destroy an appropriate monster of the right attribute in your hand, and then just any monster your opponent controls for the second monster. reason for that is these two effects are separated. So it says also they can activate their effects or attack, period, and then we've got an entirely new effect after that. So these are not linked in any way, they are independent from each other. So even if you run out of Xyz materials or have them all detached by some effect, you can still summon your True Kings way easier by destroying your opponent's monsters. And that about does it. Those are the most frequent asked questions that we get about the True Draco and True King monsters. And hopefully that'll help you out when you are viewing our tournament coverage and you see these monsters in action. Speaking of, we will be streaming the World Championship qualifier right here, Official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. You can also follow us on Facebook at Official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, or on Twitter, Yu-Gi-Oh!_TCG, and you can also catch the European WCQ when it happens over on twitch.tv/official Yu-Gi-Oh! channel. Thanks for watching.